Good morning. Thanks for joining us for day one of the debate on the 2024-2025 estimates of revenue and expenditure. We are coming to you live from the House of Parliament in Castries via the National Television Network and the Government of St. Lucia YouTube channel and Facebook page. I am Julita Peter and I am accompanied by Lawrence Adonis, who will be doing our Creole commentary. Hello, Lawrence.
Un spécial bonjour pour Julita, avec un spécial bonjour pour la côté NTN. À présent, nous, ici, là, quand il du gouvernement, côté, c'est deuxième jour budget là, mais c'est premier jour debate et bien discussion à ce budget là, avec nous, c'est qu'à faire cela face à public, manière qu'a fait à l'Est à la Ouest avec nous, comme discussion tout à l'heure. Speaker, pourquoi ici là, mais nous l'avons expliqué avec à chacun ce moment là, mais pas tout déjà là.
Okay, we have quite a few members already seated, so momentarily we will be seeing the speaker making his way to the chamber. But yesterday, Lawrence, we would have witnessed the laying of the 2024-2025 estimates of revenue and expenditure from this August chamber, and by the Prime Minister, who is also the Minister for Finance. And as per procedure, the Prime Minister first presented the estimates to the Standing Finance Committee during a closed session, and of course those estimates were approved by the Standing Committee. And just in case you might be wondering, what is the Standing Finance Committee? It is a committee chaired by the Speaker of the House, and it also comprises every elected member, and that is both government and opposition members. Just by way of note, the estimates of revenue and expenditure really lays out the annual spending plans and projected revenue collections and programs performance of all government departments. Lawrence?
Oui, le Premier ministre a présenté le budget là, avec ça, il y en a toutes ces membres qui ont pour ça assise avec d'accord, avec il fait ça hier, avec après ça, le Premier ministre a présenté le budget là, bon, comité ça là. Chairman, c'est Speaker du Conseil de gouvernement, Claudius Francis, avec il a présenté le budget là, le Premier ministre là, c'est les responsabilités pour finance et affaires développement économique, avec il a présenté le budget là hier, avec par là sur chaque différents qualités de projet gouvernement qui est embarqué pour l'année ça là, pour l'année prochaine.
Okay, so the estimates this year have a very interesting caption, I would say, and it is dubbed the year for infrastructure. And I'm sure a lot of persons are relieved to hear that. You hear of all the complaints, about the roads in particular. And so the Prime Minister has dubbed the 2024-2025 estimates of revenue and expenditure the year of infrastructure. So it means that both citizenry and visitors alike will benefit from a plethora of tactical capital investments and development programs, all aimed at modernizing and, of course, revitalizing public infrastructure. The very critical component of all of those investments is the the investments in building the human capacity, and that is very pivotal in where we want to see our country go.
Oui, Premier ministre a présenté le budget là hier, avec le budget là dans l'année à thème. Thème budget là dans c'est l'année infrastructure, ça veut dire l'année gros projet. Avec le Premier ministre a parlé à chaque différents projets gouvernement qui a commencé. Pour ça, l'année à chaque parole est critique à ce conditions chimiques. Cette laissée, le Premier ministre a dit, ça c'est à l'année pour ça enjeu chimique, avec aussi bien agrandir chimique cette laissée. Avec il mentionné à chaque chimique territoire adressé. Avec moi j'ai observé que l'année chaque chimique cette laissée qui a commencé enjeu. Là moi regarder l'année chimique moi la quoi ça c'est Babono chimique ça a tapé attention à présent. Moi aussi ouais avec a fait des nuits aussi bien à place que Cul-de-sac Goodland avec les autres places en haut cette laissée. À chaque avec aussi fait place que Babono avec en place que Casaba à chaque projet chimique qu'a fait pour à présent. Mais c'est pas seulement chimère qu'on peut me dire qui est adressé, mais aussi bien les autres projets comme bagaille technologie avec les autres facilités comme ça.
Yes, and perhaps we could remind our viewers and listeners of the budget figure this year, which is 1,8 $894,110,800 AC dollars. But matter this Creole, so eso ça dit Creole.
Well, c'est 1 billion 894 millions. Avec speaker cabinet besoin nous de bout pour après ça. Nous continuer.
Yeah, so the speaker just made his entrance into the house and so to the house sitting.
Use this one.
Almighty God, by whom alone King reign and princes decree justice, and from whom alone cometh all counsel, wisdom, and understanding, with thine unworthy servants here gathered together in thy name, do most humbly beseech thee to send down thy heavenly wisdom from above, to direct and guide us in all our consultations, and grant that we, having thy fear always before our eyes, and laying aside all private interest, prejudice, and partial affections, the result of all our counsel may be to the glory of thy blessed name, the maintenance of true religion and justice, the safety and honor and happiness of the King, the public will, peace and tranquility of St. Lucia, and the unity and knitting together of hearts of all persons and estates within the same, in true Christian love and charity, one towards another, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, and the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all evermore. Amen.
It will come on, but if you shift it, it goes up again. There you go. Good morning, members, and I do know the traffic was extremely heavy this morning, so I understand why some members were not here at the appointed 9 o'clock, although 4 members, including the leader of government business, were present at the appointed time. So I want to urge members to make a greater effort to be here on time. Pardon? Members, when we suspended the sitting last night, the question was, be it resolved that the Honorable House of Assembly do adopt the report of the Standing Finance Committee on the estimates of revenue and expenditure for the financial year 2024-2025 in the sum of $1,894,110,800 as a charge against the consolidated fund. Sorry, member for Castries South East, but the clerk's head is blocking the microphone.
That's why I stood up.
Yes. Member for Castries South East.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm happy you observed that I did more than putting on my lights off. I stood because I wanted you to have visibility that I was prepared to speak. I recognize that Madam Clerk was obscuring my vision. And hopefully we can... Thank you very much and good morning, colleagues. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support the motion that this Honorable House of Assembly do adopt the report of the Standing Finance Committee on the estimates of revenue and expenditure of the financial year 2024-2025 in the sum of $1,894,110,800. Mr. Speaker, allow me, just before my brief contribution, to call out my dear cousin, and I refer to as Auntie Rosella George of Tiroshe, who is not doing too well. But in prayer, I am wishing her well, and I ask her sons, her three sons, to take courage as a family as we tarry, as we go through life dealing with the ups and downs and challenges of this life. Mr. Speaker, also, I wish to convey my sincere condolences to the family and friends of Wavin Poisson on the passing of Brother Morris, who was known by many for his charity works in the community. I ask them to take courage, and of course, God will see us through. Mr. Speaker, I cannot help but also want to recognize the presence of the parliamentary representative who was here yesterday, the Honorable Dr. Poyot. And of course, I was extremely pleased to have seen her.
Please refer to her by her constituency.
By the member for Babono, sorry, Mr. Speaker, the member for Babono. Her presence here was and certainly adds some thrills, and I was extremely pleased and happy to see her in our midst. Mr. Speaker, many of us from time to time go through what life has to offer, but we are comfortable and we are comforted in the fact that we know our own Redeemer lives. Amen. And that he will see us through life, even in our difficult times. Mr. Speaker, I wish to place on record this morning my profound admiration for our esteemed leader and Prime Minister, the Honorable Philip Joseph Pierre. Sometimes, Mr. Speaker, I ask, what will he think next? What more will he give to St. Lucians? He never ceases to amaze me with his creativity in putting people first. And of course, I know he's helped and he received support from my able friend from Ancillary Canneries. And I cannot help but to reflect on the member from Ancillary Canneries, because I know he is helping our leader, our Prime Minister, and he's in the Ministry of Finance, assisting in putting together this really timely and an important estimates of expenditure and revenue. Mr. Speaker, I listened intently as the Prime Minister introduced the budget, and coupled with my initial review of the estimates of revenue and expenditure, I can only describe this budget as a CPR budget. CPR budget. Yes, the member for Strozel Saltibus. A CPR budget. I call it a CPR budget because it is a caring, productive, and a responsible budget that proposes to resuscitate life in terms of economic and social well-being of our St. Lucians into this country. A budget that will inject the needed resources into the country through caring, productive, and responsible programs and initiatives in a manner that demonstrates that the government is a caring, a productive, and a responsible one. A CPR budget. Mr. Speaker, I rise to speak first, to avoid the noise of who should speak first or last. Because in the good old book it says the first shall become the last, and the last shall become the first. I am not here to respond, but to project what is correct and true. Because in the presentation of the Prime Minister yesterday, what was glaring in his presentation is his truthfulness, his sincerity. And it doesn't matter what the other side says or do or contrive to come up with. Truth can defend itself. And therefore, when you are about to speak truth, you can speak first. When you are about to speak truth, you can speak last. When you are prepared to speak truth, you can speak anytime. So I know the member from Mikud South, as it is not present here, and he's either not present on a phone brick, or he's either running out away from the member from Central Castries, or he's either, for some reason or the other, member from Central Castries. He's usually out, but most times running away from the presence of the member from Central Castries. I notice. Being provocative, yeah. But Mr. Speaker, the budgeted estimates of expenditure for the Ministry of Equity is important in that regard. Social justice and empowered expenditure for 2024-2025 stand at $58,958,500. Mr. Speaker, there is a decrease from last year. A decrease from last year. Approximately $17 million decrease. Mr. Speaker, but you know, I went through the estimates of expenditure, and I remembered that in the Bible there was a story of Lazarus, and there is an artist who coined a song about this, a gospel song about the story of Lazarus, and said that even if he was 4 days late, he was still on time. The Prime Minister somehow can reduce a ministry and still give you more. And I will explain this. I will explain this. The member for Roselle is smiling. I can show you. It's amazing. How can the Prime Minister reduce the amount in equity by 17 million and still give more? I will take some time to share with you. So, Mr. Speaker, there are two areas that led to the decrease in the estimates of expenditure for the Ministry of Equity. There was a significant project under the World Bank that came to an end by approximately 10 million. The vertical and horizontal expansion of the support under the public assistance. And there was also the transfer of the National Conservation Authority from the Ministry of Equity to the rightly place of the Ministry of Tourism that led to its decrease. But I will show you, Mr. Speaker, if you go to page 647 of the estimates of expenditure, and Mr. Speaker, since this debate is about the estimates of expenditure and revenue, I would want for you to consult your document, which was made available almost 8 days earlier. Page 448. You know, usually at church, when a pastor is preaching, you usually have your Bible, and then he refer you to verses of scripture, and you must get to your Bible. So you have to get to the Bible this morning. The Bible is the estimates of expenditure, and you were given that to you. That was given to you 8 days ago. So you have no reason after the presentation this morning to construct your own arguments. So if you look, Mr. Speaker, for 2024-2025, you would see salaries and salary allowances, wages allowances, rewards and incentives, traveling, training, stationery. But you would go down to the area of, you have consultancy services, that was reduced. But grants and contribution moved from 16,982,138 to 13 million. Of course, there represents the relocation of the National Conservation Authority from the Ministry of Equity to the Ministry of Tourism. And Mr. Speaker, very important, you would look at the area of public assistance, which was $26,488,047 to $16,871,409. These two areas contribute to the reduction in the estimates of expenditure what was given to the Ministry of Equity. Is $17,545,400 to the ministry. That explains the reduction. But Mr. Speaker, on page 647, Mr. Speaker, you would, no, I'm wasting time. I have my time to. Mr. Speaker, you would recognize the amount, and I want to speak to these areas here. The areas of capital, community after school, home care program 9 million, St. Lucian human capital resilience 5 million plus, BNTF 4.6 million, rehabilitation of the human resource centers 950,000, and I will spend some time there, Mr. Speaker. Anticipatory action forecast based financing 300,000, very important. Offenders reintegration pilot project 150,000. Multiple indicator cluster survey, the mix 1.1 million. Under the family care service, you have the counseling, the establishment of a counseling unit 183,000. The Juvenile Rehabilitation Center, 300,000. And of course, Shock Responsive Social Protection Project, 292,635,000. And the COVID Safety Vulnerable Persons Response of $2.4 million, a total of $25 million in the capital area, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, each one of those areas represent, and these areas were not funded previously, Mr. Speaker, after school program. Why would the government at this time spend almost $1 million in after school program? Mr. Speaker, a lot of this will be discussed in the policy statement. when we come to discuss the policy of government or we have the debate on the policy of this government. But suffice it to say, Mr. Speaker, we understand the nature of education, we understand the inequity of our society, we understand why persons will not always be able to attend school, and you have the incidence of school dropouts. You have the incidence of deviant behaviors in our society. The times are just different, and therefore you have an opportunity for redress in the after-school program. Mr. Speaker, the home care program. Mr. Speaker, this initiative, this idea coming from the Labour Party of home care program to provide support to persons at their home, that started under the NICE program. It has to take a caring, it has to take a government that think beyond the mere scope of the rudiment government activities, the construction of roads, the construction of schools. This government mind would have had to move beyond the normal activities of government to get into somebody's home and recognize there are persons that need assistance and provide it. Mr. Speaker, one would ask, who told the Prime Minister that there are senior people? He's not a social worker. But of course, one would understand this. Yes.
Member of Castries Southeast, you're straying very close to policy statements.
Very well, Mr. Speaker. And thank you, Mr. Speaker. And like I said, I will leave all of this. But this is the justification, this is the heart of the government by investing that amount for the elder care program, Mr. Speaker. St. Lucia Human Capital Resilience Program, Mr. Speaker, another very important program, the resilience of our population. Mr. Speaker, the BNTF program. And under this program, Mr. Speaker, I will highlight that we have constructed roads in Castries South, Goodlands. The member probably didn't want me to say that, but yeah, there's a road in Goodlands, a concrete road in Goodlands. The rehabilitation, Mr. Speaker, the rehabilitation of a community center in Badney. Mr. Speaker, I do not want to speak a lot about this, but this one is very important to me for many reasons. Mr. Speaker, I'm tempted to say a little, but based on your guidance, I'll just say it for now. But the building is there for many, many years, Mr. Speaker. And in 2016, the former Prime Minister, the member for Vieux-Fort South, he was the then Prime Minister, asked that this building be renovated in 2016, and we placed a new roof on this building. Somehow they thought, Mr. Speaker, it seemed that if you do not want something to be done, it's for us to start it. This building is in the heart of the fortress of where I call supporters of the United Workers' Party in the constituency of Castries Southeast. That received nothing, even with a brand new roof on a building. But Mr. Speaker, I'm happy. I'm extremely happy we'll see the completion of this building since 2016. And our deceased brother Fox was the one who established a new roof on the building. And the land will be paid for, Mr. Speaker. Under this, provision was made to pay the person for the land, because this building has been on somebody's land. The plain area has been on somebody's land since forever. And of course, that will be addressed, and I'm happy that is allocated here. Mr. Speaker, when we have disaster, of course, allocation is made, and that is being funded under the World Food Program, anticipatory action. Mr. Speaker, when a disaster is approaching, we do not like, after the disaster, to go and provide vulnerable people with support. The Ministry of Equity, through targeting, if we announce that a hurricane is approaching, we want to, before the hurricane approach, to provide support to individuals. And that Mr. Speaker, and that, Mr. Speaker, we will do under this support right there. Mr. Speaker, the multiple indicator cluster, that will happen. Mr. Speaker, the counseling unit, there will be a counseling unit, and Mr. Speaker, counseling is needed in this country. And a total of $183,609 will be made available for this. Mr. Speaker, again, last year we received $349,000 for the juvenile center. And I love this one so dearly. A juvenile center for St. Lucia. Mr. Speaker, an additional $300,000 to continue the work, planning, engineering, architectural services, and tomorrow there's a very important meeting and site visit. Mr. Speaker, we cleared the site of the George Charles Secondary School. And again, I need to commend the Prime Minister, 300% or 500%. Why, Mr. Speaker? Because the current site for the Boys Training Center, ridiculously, we put up, there's burglar bars at the entrance where they are, those who are in conflict with the law, and then they go through the roof, which is easier to escape. So they abscond as they want to. And we have a concrete structure, 2 blocks, 3 stories, empty. That's 5 times the size of the current site. 5 times the size of the current Boys Training Center. And we did more space up there in Grosse Lake. Mr. Speaker, I'm so happy about this, because we will transform the George Charles Secondary School into a juvenile center. It will become the best in the OECS or the Caribbean. That I welcome, Mr. Speaker, and I cannot wait to celebrate the completion of this project. And $300,000 is made available for the continuation design of this juvenile center. It is rehabilitation, but it is a relocation, because some time ago almost $20 million was designed, was arranged, and a design of a project to place the juvenile center at next to Bordelaise or somewhere in Boisjoli, Dennery. In Dennery. I do not see why you would want to have a juvenile center next to a prison. Why would it's almost like automatic graduation you're suggesting. But this government suggesting to put a juvenile center in a former secondary school. The emphasis on the psyche of the juvenile center is education, it is training, it is rehabilitation. And this, I'm happy to be associated with this. Mr. Speaker, we have developed, there is an amount of $92,635 shock response social protection project. Mr. Speaker, this is so critical, and of course, the area of shock response, you would remember, Mr. Speaker, sometime last year there was a flood in a certain part of north of the island that would have been in Corinth. And you have a hazard that is localized in a particular area, and in this case it's a middle class. What this shock response initiative would allow for to apply the multidimensional aspect of poverty. A very interesting proxy test that doesn't only look at poverty in terms of income poverty, but looks at certain deprivations, so you could find out who you should prioritize when you have a disaster. So you would run through your normal country poverty survey, those who are below the poverty line. But of course, if there's a disaster in your country tomorrow, how do you prioritize? And therefore, the shock response allows for the assessment of persons who are most in need at the time of the crisis. Mr. Speaker, this $25 $1,241,000 under the capital program of the Ministry of Equity will go a long way in assisting the vulnerable population of this country. Mr. Speaker, this is the heart and soul of this government. Mr. Speaker, this is the heart and soul of why we put people first. This is the heart and soul of why I refer to this budget as a caring, productive, and responsible budget. Mr. Speaker, the sincerity of the Prime Minister's presentation has led me to reflect on how does that impact Castries Southeast. How such a budget can cause the transformation that we speak of in the Ministry of Equity. How does that happen? Mr. Speaker, even before I highlight this, if you highlight under the grants and contribution of the Ministry of Equity, you would see something very interesting on page 604 of the estimates of expenditure. And Mr. Speaker, you would notice that on the 23-24, on the grants and contribution, the Ministry of Equity received $14,938,338. And this time around, we received $12,118,388. And of course, like I said previously, the $1.9 million for the National Conservation Authority is no longer there because it has been relocated. But Mr. Speaker, there is an agency that is now under the grants and contribution of the Ministry of Equity and Social Justice. It is referred to Advocate Lincoln Resilience Movement, ALAM. They received just a meager $6,240,000. Mr. Speaker, I believe this is the most impactful, significant contribution to me in this budget, while the amount is meager. I'll explain to you why, Mr. Speaker. This organization, what's that? Yes, $240,000. 6,000, sorry, 240. But it's important, Mr. Speaker, and I'll give more details in the policy debate. But Mr. Speaker, the alarm cannot help myself, and I'll repeat it. Members are telling me, the estimates debate is more about the figures, but I cannot resist, Mr. Speaker, and bear me, Mr. Speaker, on this. Mr. Speaker, this organization, you would want to know, why are they there? Who is this organization referred to, Advocate Lincoln Resilience Movement? Who are they? And why are they receiving a grant? And I'm sure persons would want to know. Mr. Speaker, when you, based on what I've encountered on this island, what I've encountered during my work for the past 20 years, 15 years working at the St. Lucia Social Development Fund, as dealing with poverty reduction on the ills of our society, and the past few years in opposition. Mr. Speaker, when you have a 25-year-old approaching you with a disabled child, autistic, she's trying to figure out how she wants to move on with her life, but the child is ripping off her hair and she has nowhere to place the child. But she must have the child because the child has no place to have such a disabled child. ALAM is responding to that. Single parents with children who are extremely disabled can finally find a place to place their child and go to town and look for a job. Mr. Speaker, the rest I will leave it because there are more gruesome examples of why we need that support. Mr. Speaker, on the grants and contribution, Rice and Lucia Inc. would be receiving a grant. And the Sisters of Kolkata, the member for Castries South. Go for the laugh. Which one is it? Yes, would be receiving a grant because they are providing needed charitable philanthropic support. Mr. Speaker, also, Mr. Speaker, when you have an increase to Feed the Poor ministry, an increase to St. Lucy's Home, an increase in Adile's Home, the figures have now moved from 13 million, has been reduced. Because, of course, like I said, National Conservation Authority has moved. But we have seen an increase in the grants and contribution under the Ministry of Equity, Social Justice and Empowerment. Mr. Speaker, and the question is, how does this affect life? How would the Castries Southeast constituency benefit from such interventions? Mr. Speaker, I first want to reflect on the allocation made on the local government. Mr. Speaker, the local government, the Castries Southeast Council, is very important to Castries Southeast. And Mr. Speaker, just as the city of Castries, the city council is to the city of Castries, I believe so must all councils relate to the constituency. And while it takes time, I believe we must start now. I do not think in Castries Southeast we need constituency police. Although maybe in the distant future, if it becomes necessary, so it must be. But if we are to develop this country in the way that we want to, our councils must be strengthened. Our councils must respond. Mr. Speaker, what has happened under my stewardship? And I'm proud to report, Mr. Speaker, though I am humble about anything that I do, that the Castries Southeast Council, under the Act established in 2012, Mr. Speaker, when I asked someone in Castries Southeast, what is it that a staff of 12 persons in the constituency have to be a council in Castries Southeast, the second largest constituency, I was told there were one barrow, one weed eater, and a few hand tools. Mr. Speaker, my first action was that transportation is a constituency business, and I did not want transportation to be politicized. And therefore, I provide a coaster. The time when his ambassador and the Prime Minister allowed a coaster for Castries Southeast, I continue to increase the asset base of the council in Castries Southeast. Mr. Speaker, not only that Castries Southeast Council had a coaster, but Castries Southeast now sits on the Solid Waste Management Board because DEGLO, the waste, the field where they dump in garbage is in the constituency. Thank you, the Minister of Education and the member for Denry North. But that was allowed. So Castries Southeast Constituency Council now sits on Solid Waste Management Board, and you'll understand why, Mr. Speaker. Detail of it, every vehicle that going to dump garbage is into Castries Southeast DEGLO. And when the process of covering the garbage is not done well, we are greeted by the house flies in the homes of DEGLO, Bexon, Odsa. And I'm not happy about it, I will tell you, because I visit my constituents and I see what happens. Mr. Speaker, there will be a new cemetery, national cemetery. And the new National Cemetery will be in Bexon, because God forbid, or unfortunately, we continue to die. Those of us who don't to accept it and shock. It's loaded. I don't want to take away your constituent. You will have your dead. If they are. But Bexon has been identified, has been earmarked. 14 acres of land has been acquired. So the new Bexon burial ground will become the national place. So like I said to the member, for City Council is assisting us, but Castries City will not come to Bexon to bury dead. We shall bury our dead in Bexon. And therefore, the City Council is now represented on a committee to ensure the business of burial takes place. And if there's any benefit to it, it shall reside in the constituency of Castries Southeast. Making bread on the dead, we didn't start it. Mr. Speaker, the council is now represented on a committee that's responsible for jazz in Bexon. Only that we are. Only that we are doing. We buried it. Yes, jazz in Bexon. And of course, next year we're going for the main stage event. Tell you. No. We will not stand by and just be a spectator. The Castries Southeast constituency, and like I've said, in Wavin Poisson, in Forestier, is endowed with able men that can form any cabinet. We good? Huh? You could include who you want. But even that will be subjected to elections. Yeah. But I'm saying that we are able in Castries Southeast, so I do not want Castries Southeast to be looked upon as if it were, you know, when you talk about St. Lucia, you leave Castries and you skip Castries Southeast and you start heading to Dennery. No! We in it! Yeah, you head to Dennery North, Dennery South. No, we in it! And we must be counted. So yes, jazz in Castries Southeast. This is inspirational. Hills and Valleys jazz. It's here to stay. And we've just put one foot in. But I'm telling you, we're going for Pigeon Point because we can't host the main event. Yes. Trust me, we can turn our rivers into a lot more. Mr. Speaker, but there's something that's happening in Castries Southeast. And very soon you will see the opening of a bus shelter. A bus shelter at the corner of Bele and Sarah. It will be the first bus shelter in St. Lucia that have washrooms. It is the first bus shelter in St. Lucia with hairdressing salon. It is the first bus shelter that will create employment. It is the first bus shelter that have an attendant because visitors pass by. And Mr. Speaker, there is some artwork taking place on that bus shelter. When we... well, we need to be creative. We need to... And this bus shelter will be handed over to the council, Mr. Speaker, because the council will be the one collecting rent for the operations of two barbers and a hairdresser. And you have the washrooms at the bottom and the bus shelter on the side. Take a look at it, Mr. Speaker. This is innovation because Castries Southeast, we got it. We have it. We have it locked down. Parfait, sans twist, sans désordre. You understand? Mr. Speaker, absolutely innovative comfort station. And we're not doing it just for Castries Southeast. We are saying to the rest of the constituents, our ladies should not have to run to the bush or go to behind the vehicle when they want to go around the islands and enjoy. You know, the weekend is coming. St. Lucians want to go on an island tour. Why is it that they haven't got washrooms at strategic points that people should stop and use washrooms. Why is it only visitors we considering? I personally have a problem with that. So I am not arguing with everybody else. I am putting it in Castries office. Very soon, when you pass through Castries office, if you want a stop, you'll get a stop and relax, enjoy yourself, get a restroom before you move out of Castries office, because that's where it will be. Putting one at the corner of Bexon, one by Mac, one by Therefore. I believe we need to provide for our people, and we're doing that. But I'm leaving all of this for policy this debate, Mr. Speaker. I'm leaving that. I'll repeat it. Mr. Speaker, this year, Castries office will receive a truck and a pickup. Yeah, not a constituency of wheelbarrows. Castries office council, and I'm just talking about expenditure. We will receive a truck and a wheelbarrow, because we have to keep our constituency clean. But Mr. Speaker, let me move on from the council. Because when you talk about CPR, when you talk about caring, productive, when you're talking about, responsibility, it's an imagination that persons who want to grow and develop their people, develop their place, that these are the characteristics you want to look for. And that is why this budget, as best as I can describe it, is a CPR budget. Caring, productive, and responsible. Stop this boring thing, Mr. Speaker. Let's move into how how the budget will impact infrastructure in Castries office. Mr. Speaker, the ongoing works, West Coast redevelopment. Mr. Speaker, very early, and of course I've learned from all the parliamentarians I've served, and I'm maybe one of the few parliamentarians in here who have served as the executive director to two of those parliamentarians who sit here. A blue wave and a member for Viewfort South. Blue wave is not a parliamentary term, Mr. Speaker, so I prefer saying the member for Castries North and the member for Viewfort South. I was the executive director of the St. Lucia Social Development Fund, and I was able to serve both prime ministers. Mr. Speaker, and I learned from the two as I've had the opportunity to interact with them directly, not on any political issue, but more on developmental, people focus, because that's what I was responsible for. Mr. Speaker, you seize the opportunity when something is happening to see how you can affect or bring the best out of it. Design of projects, infrastructure project, is not left for an engineer, but the community, the parliamentarian must all participate to bring out the best out of the design. So upon winning the election, at the appointed time, July, I rushed to the office where there was a consultant, and I said, let me see the design of the West Coast Road. I said, you're not going to complete it without providing sidewalks for the children leaving the Marigot Primary School into their community. That is critical, Mr. Speaker. There was a design to rehabilitate West Coast Road. Mr. Speaker, if you have to travel from Lacroix to Soufrière, you have to snake yourself through to Soufrière. And the drains are deep because you are going down and climbing. Can you imagine leaving school and you heading home? You are at the mercy of vehicles speeding in one direction, there are no speed bumps, and on your sides are deep drains, almost the height of a child. I said that this project must include sidewalks, or must be pedestrian friendly, because there's a school on it, and that is being accommodated. Mr. Speaker, also I had the opportunity to highlight, and Mr. Speaker, development in St. Lucia is an interesting one. And keep me on time, Mr. Speaker. I do not want to take more than 45 minutes. I'm almost there. I'm 45 minutes. 15 minutes, Mr. Speaker. I was just testing your accuracy on time, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wanted the opportunity to correct a problem in cul-de-sac. Mr. Speaker, you could observe the land grab that's taking place in the cul-de-sac valley. And thanks to our senior minister, he have had to arrest that land grab that's taking place in the cul-de-sac valley, right, senior minister? Previously, everybody want a piece of cul-de-sac, hot grounds. Mr. Speaker, if you see the plethora of memos to cabinet who were taking a piece. So Massey have a piece, Kentucky have a piece, CPG have a piece, and other persons, except the people. Except the people. I said to the developer who is doing the road work, you will solve the problem in cul-de-sac of one, sewage flooding. Mr. Speaker, there is a communal sewage system that's there since we were in the colonial days, one septic tank. And at the bottom there, Mr. Speaker, there are lots. And one of the most mischievous things of colonization or after, the church provided people, or GIS provided people with 2,000 square foot of lot. And those persons will know the average lot today is 4,000 or 5,000. Can you imagine you have 2,000 square foot of lot of land for yourself? In cul-de-sac, going to some communities, 2,000 square foot. And there's a communal system where everybody's sewage converge. But it doesn't work, so it backs up. And when it rains, the entire place floods. I said to the roadworks, to the contractor doing the works on this west coast, do not complete it without solving your drainage problem and the sewage problem. Thank God the Prime Minister, CPR, provided $80,000 to Wasco to solve the sewage problem, Mr. Speaker, and Namalco will deal with the drainage problem. And not only that will happen, we've made funds available to deal with revitalization of the community center, a community center that is used more than any other community center, the one that is $10 million in the Bexar River. You understand, Mr. Speaker? So yes, that will happen. Infrastructure, Mr. Speaker, I'm hoping to see speed bumps and sidewalks in the community of Bexar. Mr. Speaker, just within my 2.5 years as parliamentarian, I have seen accidents that have claimed more than 4 lives. More than 4 lives over 2.5 years. I cannot count what it was before. We cannot allow Bexar to continue that way. If the professionals want to go down to Bexar and prevent accidents to take lives, I am fine with it. Until professionals and police go down to Bexar, slow down the traffic. Some technocrats say you must not put speed bumps. But I would love that. Under my watch, Mr. Speaker, 2.5 years, 4 deaths through accident. And one must check the statistics to see whether this is happening more frequently than other forms of losing lives in it. So I would love to see this addressed. Mr. Speaker, Twapiton Odson. We must, Mr. Speaker, and of course I'm happy that Montbelair, Coolitong bypass, the senior minister said he would look at it. The Lakwa Otsa completion of the Tetmac Road, Mr. Speaker, and the Flosac Road. Mr. Speaker, one of the vexing things for me is to see that you start a project under one administration, we will finish, and I would love to see this thing finished. Ministry of Health, Mr. Speaker, I would like to see the relocation of the Lakwa Health Center. The Lakwa Health Center certainly is in Castries South, because the road is the boundary. But yes, it's there. It's there. And I'm happy that we are considering this, Mr. Speaker. You cannot have a health center in that location. Lakwa Health Center is not accessible. And if you have a wheelchair, you cannot use it at all. It's in Castries South, but the people who use it, they are from Castries Southeast. So I'm not concerned where the project is, I'm concerned about who using it. Once my constituents using it, fix it. It can be in Martinique. I will. Mr. Speaker, sports. Mr. Speaker, I'm happy that in a little whisper yesterday, the Minister of Sports said, I will get a multi-purpose court. And I say, hooray. I almost wanted to celebrate. Twapiton, Cooliton will receive multi-purpose courts. Community centers, Mr. Speaker.
Member, you have 10 minutes left.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. That is more than enough time. Mr. Speaker, we will see the restoration of the Badney Community Center. And of course, Mr. Speaker, we will purchase the land. And I know the people of Bel Air, not Bel Air, Mr. Speaker, Badney will be extremely happy for this. Mr. Speaker, the decision to have small community centers must be part of a policy discussion. And I will have a conversation on this and I will elucidate on it when we have the policy statement, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Tetmac Road, we are happy that we will get monies to finish it. Therefore, recreational facility. Mr. Speaker, if we are not able to have a facility there, we will seek to acquire the land. We will identify and acquire the land. Some lands have been identified to have a facility in there for. Mr. Speaker, agriculture. Not fertilizer. The cooperatives for the Sandy Fe farmers, we must realize it. The Sandy Fe farmers are very progressive. And of course, if there's one group that we must invest in, is the farmers in Sandy Fe. Mr. Speaker, like I said, we have capacity in Castries Southeast. We just need to listen and work with these individuals. They are capable of holding positions in cabinet too. They're just not politicians. But when you have, you know, Herbert Emmanuel, a former permanent secretary, you have Bunny Mello, a former CAPSEC who is a farmer. You have Eustace Monrose. You have so many able persons in the constituency. When they sit down to plan, it's almost like a little cabinet. And they're not Adventists, they are farmers. They are farmers. You understand? But I'm saying that we have capacity in the constituency, and I would love to see the cooperative of the Sandy Fe farmers. Mr. Speaker, education in the constituency. Mr. Speaker, the Wavin Poisson Early Childhood Center will receive a comprehensive renovation. Hear what you say, Sean? By the side. Oh, okay. Oh, move on, okay. Yes, and Bella will receive a brand new early childhood center. Mr. Speaker, sadly, the Sarat Early Childhood Center has closed its doors. And the new early childhood center to be established in Bel Air will respond to the demand for early childhood center in Castries Southeast and that part of our society. Mr. Speaker, very importantly, Mr. Speaker, the Bexar Primary School will be assessed for site suitability and structural integrity. Mr. Speaker, we are very unhappy. I am not happy with the look of the Bexar Primary School. And I am not only the one saying that, the minister said to me, we will look at it, but again, the Prime Minister, through his CPR budget, caring, productive and responsible, has asked that we look at this and assess it for its site suitability and structural integrity. So we plan to do something about it. Mr. Speaker, I do not want to speak about social assistance for the island. But the Prime Minister, you know, Mr. Speaker, like I said, I've served with two different Prime Ministers who are here. But as a minister, I've worked with Prime Minister Philip Joseph Pierre. Under stimulus, Mr. Speaker, do you know, this year, we impacted over 16,000 persons? Mr. Speaker, the numbers I knew of when we were doing numbers and we were beating our chests were about 2005 per session. But this year, this Prime Minister under stimulus, over 16,000 persons benefited. This is significant. This is more than the population that are indigent. I do not know what the response will be from the opposition. But can you imagine in a year you had stimulus where you reached 16,000 persons?
Remember, you have 5 minutes left.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going well. Mr. Speaker, social assistance. Mr. Speaker, in my constituency, I could characterize what I do not by concrete and steel. Social assistance, Mr. Speaker, housing assistance, house lots, medical assistance, educational assistance, food support, small business, electrical and water connections, sporting groups and other charity sponsorship, faith-based support. That has characterized what has done in Castries Southeast more than anything else. Mr. Speaker, housing assistance is critical for the well-being of any community and especially a household. Mr. Speaker, many a times when children are missing from their homes, and you could see on social media that a child is missing, it's associated with housing condition. When a young child, especially young lady, is in Form 2, and the housing condition is not well, and some young man who has no good intention whisper into her ears, sometimes that leads her out of the house. So when a mother comes to me and asks me to extend a room for her daughter, Mr. Speaker, I know what it is. I know what I'm responding to. So, Mr. Speaker, over 300 persons in Castries Office have received housing assistance. Over 300. Yes, sir. Medical assistance, to include eye care and dental care, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, medical assistance, I include eye care and dental care. Over 150 persons in Castries Office have received medical assistance under my care and responsibility of the constituency, Mr. Speaker. And I do not find out who they are. UWPSLP, which P you are. Once you are St. Lucian and you are suffering and there's a deprivation and you need this, and I have the means, I will support. Mr. Speaker, there's a gentleman who said to me, for water connection, he has been going previously for 3 years. And he was asking, why didn't he get water connection? I said, but why didn't you get it? It's just sign, I have to sign the letter. He said, well, he said, he's not supposed to. I said, I don't understand why I should even sign a letter for you to get water and light, because as far as I read the Bible, when God created the earth, he said, let there be light. So who give the politicians the right to sign letters? I said, I'm not wasting time. Anybody who comes to me and you're from Castries Office and you're on Crownlands, you can be red, yellow, black or white. I just sign in the letter, get light. Because God did not use politics to give it. I'm not using it. Mr. Speaker, small business support. Mr. Speaker, there are persons who just need $500 to pursue the bank to organize a loan. Of course, the small loans are available, but just $500. The Prime Minister has made funds available. I support them. Don't ask for food support. And Mr. Speaker, while I speak, I'm preparing 300 hampers today to distribute tomorrow. Not hope. I don't know. Huh? Because Castries Southeast, Mr. Speaker, you need to take a visit with me, Mr. Speaker, and I will tell you, you will meet the constituents of Castries Southeast. We have our own struggles. We are in the middle of the south of the island and the north, where things are different, Mr. Speaker. And we do this, Mr. Speaker, for the betterment and to ensure. Mr. Speaker, I'd rather somebody fool me and get a bag of food than I didn't give them and they need it. And therefore I take chances and make more. That's my approach. That's me. But you cannot fool me. My head is big, but my heart is bigger. Mr. Speaker, crisis responses. Mr. Speaker, there are times a lady needs to leave her home to run away from domestic violence. And because she needs to leave, she needs transportation money. She needs to move.
Member, in the absence of the invocation of 32.8, I must ask you to take your seat. Member for Dennery South, you need to put on your mic. Alerting the police officer is not going to help you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am very happy today to stand in this august chamber to respond or to speak on the estimates of revenue and expenditure for 2024-2025. Mr. Speaker, before I continue, I always want to take the opportunity to thank the people of Dennery, Lakai, and Lime for placing their confidence in me to serve them at that level, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, without them, I would not be standing here today. Mr. Speaker, I want to endorse the estimates of revenue and expenditure for 2024 and to just take a short statement by our Prime Minister when he was presenting and to indicate that 2023 was a well-managed year for this government and it is going to set the platform for 2024-2025. Mr. Speaker, he also stated that there will be something for every St. Lucian in this budget, Mr. Speaker. Unlike the previous, where it was not the case. Mr. Speaker, I want to delve directly or straight into my ministry and to state that under the recurrent expenditure for 2024-25, we received a total of $33,821,200. On the capital expenditure, an allocation of $7,378,200 was received, making it a total of $41,199,400 for the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries, Food Security, and Rural Development. Funds were allocated to 15 capital projects, namely Pierre Lassini program receiving a total of $793,600. And we know the importance of the Pierre Lassini program, Mr. Speaker, especially with regards to the agricultural sector and the challenges that our farmers face in terms of their crops. Building resilience for adaptation to climate change and climate variability, we received an amount of $2,100,000, Mr. Speaker. And that project is a building resilience project that looks at the entire agricultural sector. And what is important for this project, Mr. Speaker, is that it is going to cover a number of regions, namely regions 1 and 2, 6 and 7. In terms of the banana management unit, sorry, we received an amount of $1,053,100, Mr. Speaker. And the banana unit, as we know, replaced the BPIU, Banana Productivity Improvement Project. And we are now focusing on the control of the black Sikatoka and surveillance of pest and disease in the agricultural sector. This unit is very critical, Mr. Speaker, as you know, the significance of the banana industry. Enhancing energy efficiency for agro-processing with solar photovoltaic power, we received an allocation of $200,000. Expansion of our food crop production. You would know that the Taiwanese government made a provision in the second phase of the 7 crops program, $9.9 million for a period of 5 years. We are in the second year of the second phase of the program, Mr. Speaker, and an allocation of $1.943 million was made available for 2024-25. Mr. Speaker, in addition to the 7 crops in the first phase that included cabbage, tomato, lettuce, watermelon, cantaloupe, we have added corn, dragon fruit, eggplant, and carrots to the list. We are hoping that this allocation will help to assist St. Lucia in meeting its target of 25% reduction in food imports by 2025. Under the cocoa sector enhancement project, Mr. Speaker, this is a project that started last year. It's in the second year. It's a 3-year project, Mr. Speaker. An amount of $290,300 is made available in this financial year to assist with the expansion or the rehabilitation of 123 acres and to rehabilitate approximately 294 acres of cocoa, Mr. Speaker. You know, we have a very good market available in the UK, and we are hoping that we will be able to continue to take advantage of this market for our farmers. Mr. Speaker, we have a new capital called tree crop expansion. And Mr. Speaker, this project came about because if you go around the country, you would see quite a lot of abandoned fertile lands, especially in the valleys of Mabuya and Rosewood, etc., Mr. Speaker. And we thought it was necessary to give some kind of attention to convert these idle lands into productive use. So we are looking at, Mr. Speaker, enhancing livelihood security and a reduction of vulnerability to climate change through a focus of selected tree crops. So we are looking at targeting approximately 100 acres of those abandoned lands in the first year, where we are going to look in terms of conducting stakeholder engagements, baseline surveys, and securing those vacant fallow lands to be able to convert them into productive land. So we are going to put in tree crops and other short-term crops to be able to ensure that we can meet or help reduce our food import bill and to meet our target of 25% by 2025. So l'année un projet neuf qui trouvé approuvé à budget là l'année ça là un projet ça là regarder terre qui vide l'année en chaille terre là regarder là drive on Saint-Lucie vous voyez l'année en chaille terre qui trouvé abandonné il pas rien qui planté en l'air il pas ni figue il pas ni rien gouvernement Saint-Lucie Food Ministry agricole ka gade se test là, because nous croyons que ces tests là important pour planter manger. Et en l'année ça là nous avons $400,000 qui trouvé à privé un budget là pour l'année prochaine 24-25 pour nous garder ces tests là et garder qui ça nous a fait puis nous ka garder en commencement pour 100 acteurs pour nous planter bagaille qu'on mango savocat avec différents fruitages à même les nous quand ça mettait différentes qualités en légumes pour garder qui manière nous ça mettre ces tests là dans en manière qui productive côté nous quand ça produit plus manger et pour reduce à ces quantités de manger nous ka mener en simplicité. Mr. Speaker, under the livestock development sector, the relocation of Boseju Agricultural Station, an amount of $900,000 have been allocated for the Volet Agricultural Station to be able to improve the breeding program of livestock and to be able to construct sheep and goat quarantine pens and swine breeding pens, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we remember this agricultural station initially was in the southern part of the island, but we have since moved the entire facility to Volet, and we are hoping that this $900,000 will help us complete the infrastructural works that are needed to get this facility operational, Mr. Speaker. While I'm on this, Mr. Speaker, under the CIRC World Bank Food and Nutrition Insecurity Program, Mr. Speaker, we are hoping by early May to receive almost 150 new bloodlines of sheep, goat, and swine, Mr. Speaker, to begin full operation of the facility. Je voulais dire that pour ces gens qui peut-être pas savent ça qu'a fait, là ils viennent pour Boseju côté nous tenir bagages animaux en Boseju, nous j'ai trouvé transfert projet ça là en place quoi créer volet mikou et nous ka quoi dat tout suite en mai nous ka en 7 animaux qui sorti l'Amérique, ça c'est presque 150 animaux nous ka pour commencer travail et pour commencer ça nous créer un artificial insemination program et pour garder qui mande nous ka ça produit plus animaux et pour réduire à ça nous ka mener en tuer. Mr. Speaker, on the repairs to fisheries facilities, Mr. Speaker, last year 2023-2024 we received an allocation of 1.1 million EC dollars, Mr. Speaker, and some of that went to the Lucia Blue Ocean facility, Mr. Speaker. We spent some of an amount of $400,000 in my constituency on the fishing port. An amount of $129,000 was spent in Miku to upgrade the washroom facility there, Mr. Speaker, and another amount was spent to upgrade the Savans Bay jetty. This year, Mr. Speaker, the $850,000 is expected to provide some repairs to the administrative building in Grosile, Savans Bay, Dennery, Viewfort facility, Castries facility, Ancillary, and Soufre. And I'm seeing the member for Ancillary Cannery is nodding his head. Yeah, now the one I'm missing, Mr. Speaker, as indicated by the member for Choiseul, an amount of $5,550,000 was allocated for repairs to the Choiseul fishing port, Mr. Speaker. The Choiseul port, as you know, we've been experiencing serious problems with sediment buildup at the entrance of the port, and it is causing serious problems for our fishers. In this financial year, we're going to see the construction of a second groin and submerged breakwater. We are going to see a continuation of dredging works, installation of navigational aids, and assessment and designs of countermeasures, Mr. Speaker. I had the opportunity to visit the site a few weeks ago, Mr. Speaker, and I can see some good progress is being made to address the problem. Mr. Speaker, The rehabilitation of the Cashfish Fisheries Complex is very critical, Mr. Speaker, as it is a very important facility for marketing of our fish. And an amount of $200,000 was allocated in this new financial year, and the amount provided is to help in terms of addressing the problems with the leaking roof, Mr. Speaker, and to be able to remove the asbestos roof that has been there for many years. Mr. Speaker, we are hoping that this facility will be reopened very soon, and our fishers will begin to market the fish and not be seen on the streets and byways night and day, rain or sun, trying to hustle to sell the fish. Mr. Speaker, for those persons who regularly drive through the Union area, you would have seen a building very nicely painted. It is called the Wildlife Conservation and Education Center, Mr. Speaker. This project started in 2018, and it was funded by an agency in Germany, Mr. Speaker. This is where we have our parrots. But in the last 3 years, Mr. Speaker, we've been encountering serious problems in terms of availability of funding to complete the project. Mr. Speaker, the project has tremendous potential because it can generate very, very serious revenue for the government by means of encouraging our visitors and our local people to see what is happening in terms of our national bird, in terms of various education and conservation measures that happens or takes place in our forest reserve. Mr. Speaker, an amount of $272,000 has been made available to complete repairs on the existing administrative building and interpretation building, and the purchase of equipment for our kitchen and hospital, Mr. Speaker. Even our wildlife, Mr. Speaker, will have a hospital to be able to take care of diseases and other problems during that period. Mr. Speaker, repairs to our log cabins, Mr. Speaker. We have 5 log cabins in the forest reserve, and you would understand that I worked there for 44 years, and those log cabins serve as a shelter, especially when you have to conduct research in the forest reserve, when we are doing surveys of our national bird, and there are times because of the distance you have to walk into the forest, Mr. Speaker, those structures or shelters would be used for us to overnight, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, those structures have deteriorated very rapidly, Mr. Speaker, and does not provide the level of comfort for forest officers to be able to overnight and occupy. As a result, in an effort to upgrade those log cabins, an amount of $350,000 have been made available to upgrade those facilities. Mr. Speaker, in going through the estimates, Mr. Speaker, I noticed a number of ministries with specific projects that would benefit my constituency, Mr. Speaker. And the first one, Mr. Speaker, is the Ministry of Commerce. I see an amount on the solarization of fisher cooperatives, Mr. Speaker, of $275,000, Mr. Speaker. And I'm hoping that my Dennery facility, Mr. Speaker, will benefit from this. Although I know initially with discussions with the member for Soufrière, Dennery was one of the first on the list, but we didn't meet our obligations in terms of getting our proposal on time, and as a result we missed it. But Mr. Speaker, I'm asking the member for Soufrière, Fonse Jacques, to please give special consideration to Dennery to benefit from this solarization, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, under the Ministry of Infrastructure, rivers and watercourse maintenance, Mr. Speaker, $3 million, Mr. Speaker, and I'm hoping that the minister, the member for Castries North, will continue to provide support in terms of desilting our rivers and natural watercourses on time, considering that the Dennery village is very vulnerable, especially when it comes to flooding. I see on the Ministry of Infrastructure, Mr. Speaker, road improvement and maintenance project, 10 million EC dollars, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm hoping that the bypass road connecting the Dennery Hospital through Newfield, Mr. Speaker, exercise chemin qui can commencer opposite Plans Restaurant, Mr. Speaker. Chemin ça la continue gouvernement concretely, mais là où il va passer, monsieur a appuyé baby ras là, il pas qu'à monter et bien connecter pour aller à l'hôpital là. Et là nous ni bagaille qu'on flooding en ville là. Il a prouvé difficile pour mener mon l'hôpital. So, moi, l'année ça là, nous avons joué support pour nous déboucher chemin ça là, et pour nous, les gens qui sont sortis, Green Mountain, Rocky Lane, Mabouya, n'importe côté, ils ont ça passer là et arriver la plus vite. We are hoping to get some attention, Mr. Speaker, for our Bois Joli Road. Chemin Bois Joli a été rangé la dernière fois, mais chemin ça là a trouvé quoi mauvais. Et puis ça c'est chemin si nous pièces flooding en la caille, en stretch la caille, mais pièces côté, ça c'est seul chemin nous a servi pour nous aller qu'à suivre. Mr. Speaker, I'm hoping that some level of attention will be provided to assist with the rehabilitation of those roads, including the Church Street Road, Mr. Speaker, the Newfield Road, Mr. Speaker, Green Mountain Road, Mr. Speaker, and other roads in Lakai and Lime. On the youth and sports, Mr. Speaker, I see an amount of $1.85 million for lighting, bulb replacement, Mr. Speaker. In Dennery, on the Dennery playing football field and cricket field, Mr. Speaker, you've noticed some lights are not working, Mr. Speaker, so I'm hoping that we can get some of those funds to assist us in addressing the issue of the bulb replacement for the Dennery football field. Under the Ministry of Housing, Mr. Speaker, an amount of $2,160,000 is made available for the National Housing Assistance Program, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this program has been a social program, Mr. Speaker, has created a major impact on the whole social infrastructure and housing infrastructure in my constituency, Mr. Speaker. Just this financial year, Mr. Speaker, I provided assistance to 76 persons in terms of support, whether it's in the form of plywood, galvanized, floor ply, concrete blocks, steel, cement, Mr. Speaker. I'm hoping that this program will continue, Mr. Speaker, in addition to the number of houses, although they are called small huts, Mr. Speaker, but they have done well to assist the needy and the persons who have face situations with housing assistance, Mr. Speaker. Under the Ministry of Education, Mr. Speaker, I note an amount of $14,195,901, Mr. Speaker. Every year, Mr. Speaker, the principal of the Dennery Primary School and other schools in my constituency, Mr. Speaker, makes requests for assistance for repairs and rehabilitation of school buildings, Mr. Speaker. And I'm certainly sure the member for Dennery North, as good as he has always been to Dennery South, will provide some assistance to help us alleviate this problem, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in terms of the Ministry of Tourism, Mr. Speaker, $3,345,000, Mr. Speaker, was allocated in this financial year. And we are hoping that we will see a revamping of the Dennery Fish Fiesta, Mr. Speaker. As you know, the Dennery Fish Fiesta was set up to assist persons after the closure of the Belfast, Mr. Speaker. And we have what we call this Saturday Fish Fiesta, what we call in normal terms, les sabla, les samedi. So I'm very happy, Mr. Speaker, we will be getting funding to begin repairs and to upgrade the facility, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this activity has great spin-off effect for the community, and I'm hoping that we can get the assistance going. Moi ka di pour tout gens Dennery la ka elime that moi te promettre en les moi te comme un candidat that nous devons faire un bagage qui primaire en les sables là. Ça c'est côté nous ni activité qu'on fait tous les samedis. Et puis bah Community Tourism Project là, au programme là, nous joignons presque 1,7 million dollars pour nous upgrade facility. Nous avons mis ce cas là plus neuf, nous avons mis côté pour mon aller servir les aller en toilette là, nous avons mis plus mais light et nous avons fait ça en première place. Sur les gens venus, nous avons une différence et pour tout le monde en ville d'Henry continue to benefit from activities. Mr. Speaker, in terms of upgrade to fisheries facilities, Mr. Speaker, for the last 15 years, Mr. Speaker, before I became the member for Dennery South, Mr. Speaker, very little was done to attend to the problems of the Dennery fishing port, Mr. Speaker. And under the fisheries facilities upgrade, Mr. Speaker, an amount of 400,000, as I mentioned earlier, was allocated, and we were able to repair the fishing stalls, Mr. Speaker. We improved drainage because there was a problem with drainage and the water not flowing into the sea, Mr. Speaker. We were able to address that. We painted the entire facility, Mr. Speaker. We are actually now repairing the moorings where the boats have been packed, Mr. Speaker, and we are in the process of refurbishing the locker rooms, Mr. Speaker. As we speak, Mr. Speaker, we are now painting the 2 locker room buildings, and in the next new financial year, we are going to replace all the damaged doors to ensure that we provide a facility that is of standard, so that when people get to the facility, Mr. Speaker, they will see that level of high standard that's supposed to be existing on the facility. Mr. Speaker, in the new financial year, Mr. Speaker, $850,000 have been allocated, Mr. Speaker, as I mentioned earlier. I'm hoping that we can fence the entire perimeter of the fishing port in Dennery, providing a gate that will be able to allow us to control activities on the port. So nous avons quoi that là nous finit travail là nous avons fait actuellement tout pêcheur Dennery, tout le monde Dennery qui est content travail là gouvernement ça l'a fait, travail là un ministère agricole a fait et travail là nous avons continuer pour faire toute facilité pêcheur primaire et pour les gens venir là yo kay ni en manière pour respecter ça yo ka because yo ka expression ces bagages nous ka manger et nous voulons well any standards. But Mr. Speaker, we're going further to train all the fish handlers on the facility, Mr. Speaker, who are engaged there, and we are going to give them special training in fish handling, and we are hoping that they will have an ID card that will recognize that they are certified fish handlers, Mr. Speaker. And we are also going to have one person employed to ensure that the place is kept at the standard that it's supposed to be. Mr. Speaker, as I mentioned earlier, the Housing Assistance Program, Mr. Speaker, 76 persons have received assistance in one way or the other, Mr. Speaker, and one house was constructed for a lady in Lapwith, which I will not mention her name, Mr. Speaker. This lady was living under poor conditions in terms of housing, Mr. Speaker, and we've been able to help her to make life a lot better for her. Mr. Speaker, in terms of the economic development of the constituency, Mr. Speaker, we have a number of vendors on the fishing port, and those vendors are, using trays, and they are on certain sections of the port which does not look or in line with standards, Mr. Speaker. And so we just constructed 3 vending booths, Mr. Speaker, that will be allocated to those vendors to be able to ensure that they maintain the level of standard or high standards that are required for vending, Mr. Speaker. In this new financial year, Mr. Speaker, under my constituency development program, Mr. Speaker, I'm hoping to construct 3 more, Mr. Speaker, so we can have more people occupy those booths. Under the Ministry of Sports, Mr. Speaker, we've refurbished the Dennery Steel Band shed, Mr. Speaker. That facility has been there for more than 10 years, and it has not been utilized in the way it's expected. We have gotten assistance, financial resources from the Ministry of Sports, Mr. Speaker, and we've rehabilitated the Stillban shed with the hope that we will get or encourage young persons within the constituency to engage in Stillban, Mr. Speaker. As you know, Mr. Speaker, the issue of crime has been a disturbing issue for the constituency, and whatever can be done to occupy our young people as much as possible will or should help curb the situation. We've seen the refurbishment of the Lakai Daycare Center, improvements in terms of tiling, Mr. Speaker, painting of the building, and we just recently upgraded the railings. We, in the new financial year, will be focusing on securing the property by improving and completing the fencing component of the building, Mr. Speaker. We just constructed or commenced the construction of the Nursery Road in Lakai, and that is a road that has been unattended to for more than 15 years, Mr. Speaker. Under the Constituency Development Program, we have begun the construction of this new road, and we are hoping that completion of this road will be in the new financial year. A new footpath commencing from the tamarind tree, that is by Lean and those persons in Lakai, that has been a major concern because of the condition of the road there, Mr. Speaker. We began construction of this new footpath last month, and it was just completed, and I must say the people of Lakai are extremely happy, Mr. Speaker. In terms of projects for 2024-2025, Mr. Speaker, as the parliamentary rep for Dennery, I have been under a lot of pressure for the status of the multipurpose center building, Mr. Speaker. This building was damaged in 2021, Mr. Speaker, and since then it has not been, it's not fit for use by the public. This is a building, Mr. Speaker, that was hosting dances and meetings, Mr. Speaker, even weddings, Mr. Speaker. And this situation, this building is in a very bad mess, Mr. Speaker. I am hoping after my discussion with the Minister for Finance that in this new financial year 24-25 some attention will be given to the building, Mr. Speaker. Je voulais dire pour toute Dennery that moi très concerné et puis condition multiple center Dennery et qui est presque 3 années hurricane marché de hurricane mais hurricane damage ou cause dommage pour multiple center et aussi si vous savez c'est la librairie et depuis tant ça là nous pourquoi ça fait rien nous Dennery pas ni accès pour côté de faire meeting danser avec bagaille comme ça. Moi ka faire un promettre that en budget neuf là nous caille faire tout ça qui est possible pour ranger multiple center. Mr. Speaker, the playing field, Mr. Speaker, the football field, Mr. Speaker, we are praying every day that we will get the funds to be able to provide the seating facility for the Dennery football field. We are hosting a number of events, football activities like Black Hat, veterans football competitions, local football competitions, Mr. Speaker, but the seating is not available, and the persons who are attending those games, Mr. Speaker, have to be standing throughout, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm hoping that in this new financial year, after my discussion with the Minister for Youth and Sports, we will see some effort or work commencing to be able to put in the seats and other facilities that are needed to ensure that persons attending games are more comfortable at or when they are at that venue. Road improvements, Mr. Speaker, we are seeing some deteriorating roads in the constituency, and I speak to areas like Lakai, Mr. Speaker, Lume, Mr. Speaker, Church Street Road passing next to Lauren's house in Denver, Mr. Speaker, the Boisjoli Road, as I mentioned earlier, the Green Mountain Road, Lakai Main Road going for the community of Lakai, we are hoping that we will be able to give some attention to those roads and to make life better for our constituents. In this new financial year, we are going to put additional lights on the Lakai playing field. We have a few lights already set up at the on the playing field, Mr. Speaker, but we are hoping that we can deal with those dark spots by Helen. And I've already engaged a contractor for costing, which I'm hoping we can begin work on very early in the next financial year. Mr. Speaker, I know in terms of sport, Dennery is part of a team under the professional league, Mr. Speaker, and I'm in the process of providing financial resources to assist with uniforms and football wear, Mr. Speaker, because I know Dennery being one of the best teams on the island, Mr. Speaker, I expect and anticipate that we will be very successful in this new competition, and we need to provide them the resources that are needed to make this happen. Mr. Speaker, I want to call on my constituents of Dennery South that they place their trust and confidence in me, and I want to assure them that I will do the best I can to make Dennery South one of the best constituencies in St. Lucia, and a constituency that may end up being the best in the next few years, Mr. Speaker. But I want to inform them that everything cannot and will not be done in 1 year. We have to go through a process. We have to do it together, Mr. Speaker. And I call on all my constituents to work with me. Let's work together for the development of the constituency of Dennery South. In closing, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the Prime Minister for the allocation to the Ministry of Agriculture. It will augur well and it will do well for the ministry, Mr. Speaker, because our farmers and other stakeholders in the sector are going through serious challenges, Mr. Speaker. As we speak, we are faced with a dilemma, Mr. Speaker, of our farmers, especially our banana farmers and plantain farmers, not being able to export fruits to the region because of unavailability of boxes at Winera, Mr. Speaker. But the ministry has taken a proactive approach, and we've placed an order of 7,500 boxes through the DR, or from the DR, Mr. Speaker, which is expected to get into St. Lucia sometime next week. Moi vle kouye à ces femmes, moi savent, especially ces femmes figues là, ces femmes banana, beaucoup de situations pour aller faire actuellement. Ça c'est un côté nous n'est un chai figue pas pour exporter, mais nous n'avons un problème avec Winera, because Winera dit, les mots parler ba yo, that yo présentement qu'à service ces machines qui fait ces boîtes là. Et puis pour ça, nous n'avons une situation côté un chai femme pas ça couper figure. Ça c'est un bagage qui a détruit moi tout bonnement as a ministre agricole. Et nous avons mis des bagages en place pour garder si nous avons une boîte plus vite que possible pour nous ça resolve situation là. On veut les prendre cher, on veut les prendre patience. Moi savent ici un temps qui pas un bon temps pour ça, mais nous quand quoi tout de suite qui possible nous caille résoudre situation. I want to thank my peers and staff of the ministry for the support throughout, Mr. Speaker, and to look forward to further support from them in the 2024-25 period, Mr. Speaker. My team in Dennery South, the council, and other persons, my chair of my constituency group, my constituents, Mr. Speaker, for the patience and understanding, and my cabinet colleagues, Mr. Speaker, for guidance, and last, Mr. Speaker, my attaché for provision and support throughout my journey in this thing. Mr. Speaker, I support the estimates 2024-2025. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg that this House stand suspended for 15 minutes.
Honourable members, the question is that this House do stand suspended for 15 minutes. And now put the question, as many as of that opinion say aye. As many of a contrary opinion say no, I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Sitting suspended.
Rise.
Eh bien, quel conseil complètement debout pour à peu près 15 minutes par présent. Avec ça, c'est pour 15 minutes, comme David Premier ministre là, Dr. Onezil m'a dit speaker pour ça debout quel conseil là pour à peu près 15 minutes. Bon matin, nous avons des présentations avec le premier monde qui parlait, c'était M. Joachim Henry, qui est membre parlement pour Castries Sud-Est. Et qui parle sur bagaille responsable, ce département est responsable là pour sécurité sociale et justice sociale. Justice sociale, il aussi parle sur, il aussi responsable pour affaires équité. Il parle sur les mots sujet tels que programme après l'école pour monde, spécialement maman qui quitte l'école avant là. Il aussi parle sur programme car pour les grands citoyens cette laissée. Et aussi parler à ce place là il rongé, c'est George F.L. Charles, l'école George F.L. Charles, pour ça mettre place pour garçons avec petites filles qui cassent loi pays. Et il y a déjà clair place là, il y a déjà déparé place là, avec place là. Donc, on continue place là pour ça mettre les petites filles avec les garçons qui cassent les lois. Avec qui aussi parler à ce Chaimoun et j'ai assisté comme ici même parlement pour Castries Sud-Est. Il est déjà by approche 300 personnes assistance pour ça Roger Caillot. Joachim Henry aussi qui budget l'année ça là CPR et des CPR là veut dire caring, productive, responsible. Avec cité Premier ministre là pour présenter le budget l'année ça. Avec aussi par là ce monde déjà assisté en ligne des affaires médicales, des affaires monde qui pas bien avec besoin d'assistance. Et j'ai assisté à haut avec combien de monde en ligne des affaires médicales. Bon, je vois que je n'ai pas un temps fini pour cette aujourd'hui. Il déjà c'est toutes les il pour ça faire présentation avec explicateur pour ça m'aider pour ça assise. Ça veut dire il partait m'aider parlement pour plus temps pour ça faire présentation avec explicateur cause m'aider pour ça assise. L'autre monde qui parlait c'était membre parlement pour Denver Sud, ministre agriculture pêche avec Baïko les forêts monsieur Alfred Prosper. Monsieur Prosper par là sur les affaires plus de la unit là. Ces places là, c'est que ces polices là pour les affaires d'avouer les femmes. Et aussi parler à ce terre qui est abandonné en cette laissée avec des qui c'était ça là pour ça faire différents projets tels que pour ça planter cacao aussi bien pour ça planter baïko mago zaboka avec les gym et dit que ça a aidé couper à ce dépenses à ce moment c'est de ce qu'acheter l'autre pays et aussi par là ce bon séjour Vieux-Fort avec des qui à présent il y a déjà petit bon séjour côté de Vieux-Fort station agricole là un bon séjour en Vieux-Fort avec après ça il y a opéré en volet et il y a jeune d'autres animaux qui sont de l'autre pays avec remettre ces animaux ça là en volet côté de station agricole à présent mais c'est Prosper aussi par là ça le gouvernement a fait en affaire pêche avec des qui il a fait un travail en place que l'Aslawe avec aussi bien à choisir il aussi dit qu'il y a travail à ce maison pêche là en Castries il a essayé de tirer frétail là avec il va tirer avec Albert Stoss qui a place là ça c'est Castouille et de qui ça fait pêcher qu'avant à sous la oui avec aller tout partout pour ça vendre poisson c'est un bagage oublié de bout tout bonnement et aussi parler à ce à maison les liens côté il y aura pas qu'à bailler Jaco avec l'autre animaux réserve avec des qui il y aura à travers ce place là avec place là commencé à bâtir depuis 1918 avec c'est Allemand qui a assisté bâtir place là bon monsieur Prosper aussi par là sur ce qu'a fait paroisse à Denver Sud et j'ai approché 76 personnes assistance pour ça Roger Caillou et aussi des qui il veut travailler il veut le gouvernement travailler à ce multi-purpose center en village d'Henry multi-purpose center aussi une bibliothèque là en village d'Henry bon mais c'est Prosper des qui place a été affecté par un cyclone un hurricane avec il pourra manger juste toujours avec il veut le gouvernement adressé avec Roger place ça il aussi parlé à ce grand là d'Henry et dès que grand là d'Henry il veut place la assistance aussi parce que ça qui fait là c'est place là pas tellement non spécialement côté monde pour ça assise dans les côté pour assise de l'année jouer de l'année by activité sportive d'Henry il aussi parlé à ce chemin qui doit faire attention chemin qui besoin attention tel que chemin la caille aussi bien chemin l'église et avec chemin bois joli d'Henry Monsieur Prosper c'était des monde pour ça parler aujourd'hui avec des monde qui parler aujourd'hui comme Premier ministre a présenté l'adresse budget là hier avec dit qu'il a supporté budget avec compte de qui budget l'année ça là estimé en valeur de oui budget l'année ça là estimé qui a valeur de 1 billion 894 millions avec 10 800 $. C'est budget pour l'année ça là pour l'année prochaine avec description à ce budget car continuer et c'est là mais qu'on a c'est même parlement pour un poste là pour 15 minutes avec dévié à petit moment avec je l'ai interviewé je nous après ça il est avec nous avec quelqu'un qui a fait des stages. Ça fait la présence il prend un pause pour 15 minutes.
Yes, it does. Yeah. We are on a 15-minute break. Yeah. Perhaps I'll call it a water break. A water break. So we've had so far, we've had two MPs presenting. The opening batsman was the Member of Parliament for Castries Southeast, and that's Honorable Joachim Henry. And after him, we had the Member of Parliament for Denry South, Honorable Alfred Prosper. And of course, they articulated very well some of the projects and the programs that will be executed during the new financial year. Minister Honorable Joachim Henry did speak very importantly the over $300,000 is around that being allocated for the retrofitting of the former George Charles Secondary School where the juvenile center will be housed. So the current boys training center will now be located in that new facility. Very important. Yes, Lawrence?
Oui, aussi avec Juvenile Center, Julieta, c'est pas seulement pour garçons de ça, c'est garçons Boys Training Center. Aussi bien pour ces petites filles qui Uptown, c'est
the Uptown Girls Garden, because as it is now, those young ladies, they are there during the day, but it does not provide living accommodation for them. So that's a very good initiative by the government to, have this facility to house both the female and the male wards.
Oui, avec indiqué, il y aura essayé de faire place la première place des enfants qui cassent loi en pays OICS avec peut-être Caribla.
Yes, yes. But just to go back to Minister Henry, I chuckled a bit when he actually described the budget as a CPR budget. CPR. And he went on to say that it was a budget that was caring, productive, and responsible, and one that resuscitates life. And I guess adding that it really injects some much needed resources in the economy. But Minister Alfred Prosper, Honorable Alfred Prosper, did speak of several investments also in his constituency. He spoke about the fisher folk benefiting immensely from some investment as far as the fishing complex is concerned.
Oui, par là, sur les affaires pêche, avec pas seulement en Denver, mais aussi bien en place que Lanslawe, avec aussi bien en place que Choisey, avec aussi bien en Castouille, des sacs Castouille à besoin de attention, spécialement fétail là en Castouille, mais ça besoin d'attention et il va essayer de tirer ces Albertos là qui
Yes, and we kind of move away from some of the roads that have been identified here by Minister Prosper as well, noting that the budget this year is one of infrastructure, is focused heavily on infrastructure, and so I guess we will be hearing a lot more from the other parliamentarians when the House resumes in just a while. A lot more will be said about infrastructure, about roads, and other like projects.
Oui, qu'on aura donc l'année ça, c'est le budget là. Thème là, c'est the year of infrastructure. L'année pour gros projet avec Monsieur Prosper par là sur projet chimie en place de qui avait chimie qui avait Roger avec aussi bien Monsieur Henry par là sur projet qui avait fait aussi bien en place de avec compte de plus bon à chaque projet chimie déjà commencé à s'établir en place que Babono, en place que Kazaba à Grosile, en place que Denry, bon chimie Denry même avec à chaque autre côté à s'établir projet chimie déjà commencé.
Okay, and Lawrence, maybe we could just go back a bit to the Prime Minister's presentation yesterday, and in some of the highlights were for example, the Prime Minister pointed to the slow pace of the global economic environment, the high interest rates, which he said was due to inflation, control measures by the highly industrialized countries, and the challenges with supply chains. He also spoke of the undermining of world security caused, of course, by the Ukraine and Gaza war, and the political instability and violence in Haiti. And just imagine the government has to, put all measures in place and to ensure that even within our local sphere, that economic activity continues to spiral in spite of those challenges. And no doubt, some of it, I suspect, will be impacted because we are one global village. Whatever happens in not just in our neighboring islands, but even further afield, has some impact on us right here in St. Lucia. He did say that it was imperative that provision be made to build resilience for adaptation to global events in all infrastructure and agricultural programs. And we know there's a lot of talk about climate change. And so we have to ensure that whatever we do, that we put buffers in place, so as to minimize the likelihood, of the great impacts caused by climate change.
Oui, Judith, Prime Minister, durant présentation hier, il a présenté le budget là hier, il parlait à ce manière développement international qui a affecté place que cette laissée parce que comme ça nous c'est un seul village à la terre avec manière la guerre à place que Ukraine avec aussi bien situation en Haïti avec l'autre place qui a affecté cette laissée avec pour ça la gouvernement pour avoir certaines démarches pour ça ouais que pays a pas affecté négativement.
Yes. I'm sure our listeners and viewers will be happy to note also that the Prime Minister did ensure that his government will continue to put resources in place to ensure that the quality of life of our people is enhanced, and that will be done by the government creating opportunities for wealth creation and to ensure also that the objective of the government, the objectives are met.
Oui, d'après avec ça, directeur pour permettre par à son chef programme social, le gouvernement qui a baqué à sous, spécialement pour ça, oui, des gens qui plus vulnérables dans la société, côté que ce programme ça là qui continuer avec le gouvernement qui continue à assister ces gens là, qu'on thème parti politique qui là qui mettre peuple là avant avec assurer que ils mettent ce programme ça à la place pour savoir que les gens qui plus faibles parmi nous, les gens qui plus vulnérables parmi nous, qui joignent assistance.
Sure, and my colleagues in the public service, I'm sure they might be smiling now because the Prime Minister also mentioned an increase in the allocation for salaries and wages, of course, representing a lion's share, as he put it, of recurrent expenditure, and I think it's an amount of $577 million. Okay, towards salaries and wages, and retirement, of course, taking up a chunk of that. Yeah, so all of that, to ensure that even in the public service, there's no hiding from it. There has been a lot of criticisms. People talk about public servants not being efficient, and some of them, of course, or most of it unfounded, but they do have sometimes, it's justified at times, and so the government will ensure that all of those resources will be expended so that public officers, deliver the service on time, efficiently, in a professional manner, what have you.
Oui, comme je donc le Premier ministre a parlé à ce plan pour ça hausser salaire les serveurs publics, avec ces bonnes nouvelles pour les serveurs publics à cette laissée. Mais en même temps, quand je dis les mêmes publics qui critiquent les serveurs publics à cette laissée, c'est-à-dire qu'ils n'ont pas produit, fait ça yo vle yo ka nek assise là ada mon ka regarder internet ada mon ka ver bagay sur médias sociaux pendant qui pas fait travail avec des qui ça va tout le monde regarder ça mais ça c'est bagay qui se poser attraper adresser mais bonne nouvelle là c'est le Premier ministre là j'ai annoncé que ça va public à journée hausse mon salaire mais voilà pour on annoncement à ce qui combien d'argent quel pourcentage qui a hausse mon salaire ça moi quoi ça fait avec assemblée avec union qui représenter ces travailleurs.
Okay. In terms of customer and investor confidence, that the Prime Minister indicated was on the rise, and he said there was actually an overall performance in the last fiscal year despite the global challenges. There was a total revenue of $1.6 billion that was raised to finance government operations and capital projects. So overall, I think the outlook looks good for St. Lucia. And barring unforeseen circumstances, I think we are in for a very buoyant economy in the new fiscal year.
Oui, comme le ministre a toujours dit avec rapport des fois institutions qui a montré que l'économie cette laissée qui a continué faire bien malgré l'année chaise j'avais un challenge mais des fois by the by the mais l'économie cette laissée qui a fait assez bien avec si by continuer comme ça l'économie qui fait plus bien à 2024-2025.
Okay, so again, the budget figure is $1,894,110,800 EC dollars, and today is day one of the debate on the 2004-2005 estimates of revenue and expenditure, and the two members have already lent their voices to the debate, and they are Honorable Joachim Henry and Honorable Alfred Prosper. So in a moment, you will be hearing from a few other members and then I guess we will see the wrap up of day one of the debate, which continues tomorrow.
Oui, comme tu l'as dit, budget l'année là estimé à 1 billion 894 millions 100 avec 10 800 dollars. C'est l'argent que le gouvernement estimé qu'il aurait été dépensé pour l'instant l'année là privé l'année prochaine. Pour ça qu'il fait à présent, c'est même parlement à il y a pause pour la prochaine 15 minutes. Avec, après ça, la discussion va continuer à ce budget. Ce qui j'ai parlé aujourd'hui, c'est des mêmes gouvernements. Premier, c'était Joachim Henry, même parlement pour Castries Sud East. Et puis l'autre, là, c'était même parlement pour Denry Sud, Alfred Prosper. Discussion supposée continuer aujourd'hui à ce budget pour éviter demain ça pas dire. Mais à nous espérer après ça, l'esprit qui a dévié avec les autres membres là pour ça continuer la discussion à ce budget.
Okay, so Lawrence, I think at this time we will go back to Master Control, and we will return momentarily with more on the first day of the debate on the 2024-2025 estimates of revenue and expenditure. Please tune to the National Television Network.